Thank you. Um, let's start with the first session for today. This is the agenda for this first session. It's all around this hot topic as it could be seen yesterday of the registry. First, I would like to do a very brief introduction and the actual situation on registry and transplantation, new models of quality, and the hot topic, our registry, and the call from the European Union. And we want to have as much time as possible to hear from you, to discuss, and at the end. So, well, patient registries and databases constitute key instruments to develop clinical research, to improve patient care, and healthcare quality evaluation and planning. They are the best way of pooling data to achieve a sufficient sample size for the epidemiological or clinical research and healthcare quality evaluation. Registries serve as a recruitment tool for the launch of studies focusing on disease, etiology, pathogenesis, diagnosis, and treatment therapy. Well, we want to focus on patients' registries that will contribute to the ERN's evaluation process, foreseen in the ERN implementing decision and to the continuous monitoring and quality improvement system of the networks. Patient registries will cover the diseases under the scope of the networks and may include, inter alia, the information of patients treated by the members of the networks while fully respecting, obviously, the data protection rules. Well, as this is the analysis of the existing registry in adults and pediatric transplantation activities all across Europe. You can see in the right side in green the adult registries and in orange the pediatric registry, and on the left side what are they about. As you can see, the most frequent is our clinical registries, 46% of the registries, and in the other side, as you can see, there's only 3 registries dedicated to quality of life. Well, this existing registry obviously have some limitation, specifically on pediatric transplantation. Some of the actual registry, you can see all of them in the right side, are not specific for pediatric population. There are not a common set of data for pediatric transplantation. They have scarce data from multi-organ transplantation. There are not a consensus list of common diagnosis of transplant complication. There's a low integration of clinical data with patient omics or other big data from RD platforms. There have very limited patient involvement and no patient reported outcome measures to drive improvements in services. Well, the main problems in this type of registry, just the bottom of the slide, there's means limited patient involvement in the design, oversight, or operations. Patients might not be asked to identify the priorities for data to be collected. Patients don't usually have access to the data collected, even when it's about them, and or opportunities to add data outside medical encounters. And patients, they cannot use the data to support self-management or share decision. So we believe that we have an opportunity to create a new model of quality and patient-focused registries.
So in this context, when we talk about the new models of the registries, we need to talk about the quality and patient-focused registries. So before that, and if we want to structure a model of registry, we need to focus in the main aim of the registry, that is improve the healthcare. And how we can improve this healthcare? We can improve by the implication of all the stakeholders. The registry are more efficient by the action of the patients, by the provider and researchers. So if we want this context, and if we have the power of sharing responsibilities among the patients, clinicians, and scientists for design, governing, and evaluate services will be allow improvement of healthcare and research. So in this context, we have the participation of the provider and care teams with the feed forward of the clinical data. And with this, in this context, also with the patient and family data that create a feed forward also, we have a system to share information. In this context, the registry about the personal healthcare records, or also the electronic healthcare records, we can create a digital collection and use of both clinical and patient report outcomes to guide care and as basis for improvement, research, and public health policy. With this, we have a high value of healthcare service and optimal health and research for the patients and population. Therefore, it's important the patient experience. And what is the purpose of this is allows the patients to provide direct feedback on their care to drive improvement in service. That will we can do that with quality and quantitative approach, like surveys, focus groups, patients' history of journey, and observations. And what are the tools that we have now? We have the patient report outcome measures, prompts, and also we have the real-time patient feedback facilitated by the patient report experience measures, PREMS. So with this, we have this effort to increase the patient involvement in the decision-making about their care. So regarding to the purpose of the prompts and PREMS, we have in the individual, we improve the quality of care by informing care planning and management. In the service, we can identify what's working well in areas for improvement. And also in the system, we can evaluate the system of integration and outcomes. And this system will be accessible, consistent, and transparent information. And also, this environment for relevant and meaningful to clinicals and consumers. About the prompts, the patient-reported outcome measures, we know that it's a tool to capture a person's perception of their health. They are validated genetic and disease-specific tools to do that. For example, measures for symptoms, distress, anxiety, unmet needs. For example, quality of life questionnaires, symptoms, AG pain, distress, depression, etc. But we noticed in the last decade that in the literature we have an increase of the prompts and the use of this and the results of this kind of tools to measure the outcomes of the patients. One example is Click, is from Netherlands. Click has been developed for all children from 0 to 18 years and is for chronic illness, but also children who has been hospitalized. Click is a web-based method which can be used to give clear overview of quality of life of chronic illness in children and the perception in their parents. By using Click method can be identified and discussed early on. In addition, relevant intervention can be offered to teach children how to cope with their disease and to support parents and chronically ill children. In this website, there are participation of 26 hospitals and almost 15,000 of patients participant in this project. That is a view of the report, the real-time report that the patient have access. and also the clinicians. And we can see the different domains for the quality of life when we integrate the information in real time for physical, emotional, social, and school. And we have a continuous measures in the time when we can see some change over the time, and also we classify these changes in a rank of risks. For example, if the patient is normal or is subclinical problems or in a risk. In another hand, we have the patient report experience measures that is the capture of a person's perception of their experience with healthcare system or service or procedure or intervention. There are various indicators that include like surveys, questionnaires. Also, we have the time spent waiting, access to and ability to navigate service, the involvement and decision making, the knowledge of care plan and pathways, the quality of communication, the support to manage long-term conditions, and also will they recommend the service to the family and friends. So with the patient involvement through the patient-centered care required experience, and these experience questions will be helpful to improve the healthcare systems. With all this information and with all these tools, we have many names in the literature, but we know that, for example, this kind of registries, this quality of registry, these clinical audits, or maybe these quality improvement programs, that all things is the same and is the data of the patient experience and their outcomes. If we want to integrate this with the clinical outcomes, we have a system when we can standardize information about the outcomes, the patient diagnosis, and the care process. And we can do a system comparison and analysis across the multiple sites. That is possible, and there are a lot of examples in the literature, and also in Europe, like in United Kingdom, there are about 50 clinical audit programs. In US, about 110 quality registry and report quality metrics. And also the most relevant in Europe probably is Sweden example with 100 covering conditions. So when we talk about the patient-focused registry, the aims will be to facilitate public reporting, to respect retrospective and prospective research also. With this information, integrate the clinical outcomes with the patient outcomes. Also, this information will be helpful to professionals, to development, and to improve the healthcare system, and also will be reveal variations in a practice, in the process, and the outcomes, and allow to identify targets for improvement. And I don't want to extend to more, but one example, what sign of change will be the Swedish Rheumatology Quality Registry. In this registry, we can see with the participation, with the participation of the patient, with the follow-up of the patient's outcomes, we can even, or maybe we have the results, for example, like this, that the registry have document 50% decrease in inflammatory activity among the people with rheumatoid arthritis. So this is an example that some registries are gaining the capacity to collect data on patient priorities and support care in real time. So we pass to the ARN registry call. Eduardo.
Thank you. So very briefly, because the idea now is to discuss and see what's your idea, what we wanted. so far is to give you an overview of what we think is the reality of registries now in Europe in the area of transplantation, and also what could be the innovative aspects or the innovative views that we could give to our putative new registry. Because what we have is ahead of us in some days or weeks time, not more than that, the opportunity to get a proposal in which we could make a more specific proposal to the European Union from our ERN. And as we mentioned yesterday, and you probably are aware, the fact that the creation of a registry is an operational criteria for the all the ERNs to be evaluated, and the fact that is requested to create registries that could enhance the capacity of doing clinical research, epidemiological research, and that is seen as one of the major outcomes that the ERNs could provide for future improvement of quality of care in the areas of interest. The European Union realized that the request for the ERNs to create registries was not fully supported initially with the obviously the budget that is provided to each ERN. So in 2018, they took advantage of a call that was already more or less prepared at that time, and that unfortunately could not provide sufficient funds for all the ERNs. So it was a competitive proposal in which, if you remember, we participated and we applied with a proposal for a registry called Peter, that at that time had some characteristics that now we think need to be reevaluated. And the fact that it was not possible to fund all the registries made the European Union to keep working on this area. And then within this new program, the third program for the UNOS action in the field of health, there will be a call that is specifically addressed to provide sufficient funds for the ERNs to develop a registry. So one thing that they request is trying to find interoperability among different registries, especially if there are existing data existing registries that could be used to even capture data or just share data with the new registries, or to compile different registries to demonstrate that that area is being covered. And for this, the European Union has developed through the Joint Research Center a compilation, and they have compiled the number of existing registries in Europe devoted to rare diseases, and also have provided some standards for new registries to adhere to in order to make sure that in the future there is some uniformity, some interoperability, and some capacity to for the registries to for the future registries to be as much intercomparable and as much intercommunicative as possible. So any new registry should adhere to these recommendations. So the idea is that ERNs are there are unprecedented opportunities in Europe to collect a number of patients in different fields, in different areas, cohorts of patients that are going to be followed and that are being treated in expert centers. And then it is important to know that there are some ERNs that already got funded in the first call in 2018. They have been working 1.5 years in their own registries, and the European Union, the DG Santé, through the different working groups that the ERNs have formed. You know that we are, in our ERN, we have working groups, but all the 24 coordinating centers, we frequently meet and we participate in joint meetings every 3 months approximately. And in order to address many issues that are common and are needed to all the ERNs, there are several working groups that have been created in which different ERNs participate. So there is a research working group in which in the last months, there has been created a task force has been created to work on this area of registries. So next Wednesday, the 14th, there is a teleconference in which we are going to hear the experience of the 5 ERNs that have already been funded and are working on their registries. And the 19 ERNs we are going to have is a 2 hours conference. We are going to have an opportunity to exchange our view about this new call. What are we planning to do? It will be an opportunity to interact and to talk to other ERNs that may have some areas, common areas, for instance, with us, with TransplantChild. And that will be a moment to just ask or to discuss if, for instance, some of the registries that are already existing or that may contain some fields that could be interesting for the transplantation for our ERN eventually could be used, or if we could find some way to somehow get data or at least to connect somehow the potential new registry with the existing registries. We don't know yet if that's going to be possible, but that's something that we could try to do. But what we have now is an unprecedented opportunity to get support from the European Union to create a new registry devoted to pediatric transplantation. And then for what we are seeing little by little, the European Union is somehow orientating new calls or new research opportunities to support ERNs. So the fact that this call is going to be supporting all ERNs made us think that the idea of supporting ERNs registry is going to be probably long, hopefully will be long-lasting in time. So although this call and the amount of money that we may get for this call may be not sufficient for the sustainability, long-term sustainability of the registry, if we build up something important and interesting and useful, we may have some new opportunities to sustain registries in the future through different calls. So as I said, what is important is we need to follow the standards that the European Platform for Rare Disease Registration and the Joint Research Council Center is providing for new registries. So it's just basically to define the fields, to define the way to anonymize patient data. We can go into details if you want, but there's some standards that are already available for consultation. And as I said, it's expected that 3,800,000 euros will be available for this call. So the calculation is that approximately 200,000 euros will go to each ERN for a 3-year period. And then the idea is that today we could make somehow an agreement, a plan of how we want to build up our registry, what will be the focus of our registry, who wants to participate in different aspects of the creation of the registry. And for what we discussed yesterday, the idea is that we know that there are some registries, and you contribute to some. We also contribute to some registries that are dealing with clinical data from transplanted children. We have a scan every registry that is available in Europe, and as we discussed, we think that there is not a single registry collecting data for any type of transplant in a child. So as we discussed yesterday, the idea is to make a very simple collection of data that could be focused in common aspects or common elements that are important for any transplanted child. The idea is not to duplicate or triplicate the effort you do collecting data for other registries, and we have discussed this in the last 2 years with you. We have heard you. We have the same feeling that if we build up something new, it has to be something really that is not existing, that is innovative, and that is really is going to make is going to provide an added value to what is existing now. So, as you know, the spirit of TransplantChild is understanding that pulling all transplanted children, independently of the type of transplant, and focusing on common aspects, we can build up more numbers. We can have more information about common complications, and that will be the main spirit and the main focus of the registry. So the idea is that what we could do and how you could participate is that obviously we have to design and define the project. We have to establish the governance of this registry. We, together with this idea of being innovative in this aspect of pulling together different transplants, we thought that the second opportunity of the second aspect in which this registry could be innovative could be, as Juan mentioned, by the incorporation of the PROMs and the PREMs as a new tool to collect patients' experience, to improve our healthcare through the feedback of the patients. So we think that both things together, combining the strength of having more numbers of transplanted patients, focusing on problems like the treatment, the complications that could have a relevance in the clinical management, that could provide opportunities for research, to tackle new areas like we discussed yesterday, to detect or to compile together tolerant individuals, or to detect or compile some clinical data from each patient that could allow us to build up new projects, just having sufficient number of patients, or to get a common set of data elements that could provide us the opportunity to promote research by ourselves, or to be receptive to any proposal that could come from other stakeholders from outside the area, but that could benefit from the fact that we could have sufficient information as to explore if any project could be doable or could be possible in different areas of transplantation, together with this incorporation of these new tools to collect patients' data. I think that could be the way to go. So I will go back to this, but the idea is that what we propose is, and this is just obviously a proposal, and we have been discussing this, is that these are not definite fields. This is just the areas in which we think that a common registry could work on. So we could think in collecting data about opportunistic infections or infections, viral reactivations, tumors, lymphoproliferative diseases, impact on growth, metabolic or cardiovascular disorders, disability, and obviously all what is surrounding the immunosuppressive treatment. So this will be together with the ones that you can propose, or some we could reduce the scope of the areas that we want to collect. We didn't want to bring you today a set of fields or a set of data to propose already the collection of this data. Obviously, we will have to define what will be the best definition for each data to be collected. If we could adhere to some recommendations from other registries, we could scan how other registries have collected this data, of how we define in the clinical guidelines, for instance, the outcomes of the definition of the outcomes in terms of how they have been defined to collect data in a similar way. So the idea is to be very simple. We have made a very preliminary approach, and we narrow the number of fields to collect to around 20, to be sure that we have sufficient data to have a backbone in each patient, and then to build up on that with all these opportunities to enhance in the future the registry with the collection of patients' data. And the idea will be to as we always think that we want to have some return, or to not very far from the beginning of any project, to have some return, to encourage all of us and to be satisfied by the fact that we are creating something that is just reporting benefits from the very beginning. So we thought that the first thing we could do is just to build up the registry, to collect the data, and then we think that the fact that we are going to have patients that are in an early phase of transplantation, or some patients that could be in a later phase of transplantation, we could have small children, and then we will have to talk to parents about the experience with their child through the process of transplantation. But we also will have adolescents, of even adults that were transplanted as children. We think that from the very beginning, as soon as we have data collected, we can start thinking of projects or transversal projects that could have, first a snapshot of the experience of children 15 years after transplantation, how they went through the transition process. So the idea is that please don't see this as a futile exercise of collecting data by the sake of collecting data. The idea will be to have already in mind from the very beginning how we want to integrate the registry and what will be the questions that we will use for this registry in order to really make some use of it. And so the idea is that we will have to define the target population. We don't need to start from the very beginning. The idea is to build up the backbone and then to construct or to expand the possibilities of the registry. So we will have to identify how to access and engage the target population if we develop prompts and prems. And obviously for this we will need the help and all the healthcare providers to be involved. We more or less estimate that if we combine together data from clinicians and data from patients, the major effort could be relying on patients if we think that maybe a 10-20% of the data may be collected by clinicians and the other rest of data, if we fully expand the use of prems and prompts, could be collected by patients. And then obviously we have to work on how to capture the pros and prems and how we will incorporate them as part of the care process and the workflow in each institution. And obviously it will be important to standardize on how we do it. But if you have experience or you think that you can contribute to suggestions in this field, obviously it will be very, very nice to hear from you. We could establish a timeline to do this process. And as I said, we could have pilot studies to, for instance, validate the use of a particular tool or a particular prompt in a pediatric population. As I said, we can think, for instance, in a first study to compare the most relevant complications during the first year of transplant, and ideally in the future, if the work in the registry is working well and we manage to incorporate it to our daily clinical practice, we can think in prospective studies in which any new transplanted child will be followed together with his normal follow-up with the use of this registry and the collection of data that are reported for families and patients when they get older, in order to improve all the healthcare through the input of the patients. And I think that it could be open to any possible approach. And I think that with this basic overview, it's time for us to discuss what you think about this idea. If you think it's doable, do you think we could focus the proposal in another way? So, thank you. Questions? Nos sentamos. ¿Queréis que nos sentemos? We're going to sit down here and probably just to get some notes and everything and see what you think.
Hello. One of the things you were talking about is how to collect all the impressions of the patients. I was talking with Lars from Sweden, and they have a tool. I think it is quite useful. This is called Key for Care, and they are using this tool in their hospital. It's a very useful tool because it's only a tablet with a few questions, and they use this tablet when the patients came out of the hospital. Each time that the patient goes to the hospital, at the end they give him this tablet with 10, 15 questions, very simple questions about the care, about how they were feeling inside the hospital and how was the experience in the hospital. And this is completely anonymous. That is very important for them because they feel free to just, with a few ticks, to say how was all the care in the hospital, and all the information goes directly to the direction of the hospital. I think this could be a very good tool, or something like this, a very good tool to know about the feeling of the patients when they are at the hospital. It's one idea. I think it could be very useful.
Sorry. Can I just say, first of all, I applaud your ambition. It would be very, very, we have to have a registry. We are required to have one. But I think if you're to provide this quantity and quality of data every year for every patient who's had a transplant this year and who had one last year and the year before that, first of all, there's a massive investment in collection of that data. And secondly, there's a big investment in having the resource to maintain it and update it, plus extra data year on year. I mean, what you're talking about is huge, actually. It's a good thing to do. My concerns are twofold. First of all, you've only got 200,000 euros, which over 3 years means you can employ more or less one person, maybe a little more, but basically, and you need IT skills and you need registry supervision skills, and they may not be the same person. So there's 2 jobs and money for one person. So that's an issue. And in my institution, we will have 50 transplants a year. So 50 data sets, plus we've 900 patients in the background. So we have 900 more data sets we've got to invest in and maintain. So I'm not sure that we have the resources in our institution to maintain data in that way. I also think, I mean, from our own experience of data collection, that it's for our own internal data collection, it's a big job. And if you take your eyes off the ball for 1 minute, the quality of your data falls off and you let everyone else down. So that's a real problem. I think also that the management of data is changing. I think the days of big registries where you had to have every piece of data for every purpose, for everything that you might do in the future, audit, research, quality control, I think is passing. And I think we'll be managing data as big data in future, and that we will be able to pool through data sharing agreements all our clinical data and some other data which we collect in real time for the benefit of patients there and then. And we will be able to pool it, and with search engines designed for our purposes, we will search every institution's data, and we will collect every year reports semi-automatically, which will just need a review. And I think we have to be, and that means that there is not a central data collection anymore, although some of the data may be pooled from the big data searches and kept as central data for year-on-year review, but the majority will simply stay with the institutions. And that has a lot of advantages. It has a disadvantage of some errors and the computer work that has to be done to prepare the search engines, but it has the advantages that we can change year on year relatively easily. It's not manpower intensive once you get it right. And on top of that, you can change what you do every year. This year, we might choose to look at quality of outputs of this, or PTLD, and next year we might look at the PTLD again to see if it's changed as a result of intervention, and we might add in PREMS as well, or something of that sort. So this is the future, I think. So I'm a bit apprehensive of putting about a huge amount of resource, which we don't have in any case, into something which won't serve the purpose of 5 or 10 years' time.
I agree with Alistair. You have to keep it simple and quite basic, focus on a very basic data set to start with, because this is what we will be able to manage, I think. The major thing here is to get the patient's reported outcomes and experiences into the system and put the workload sort of on the patient. They are the ones that's supposed to put in the data. That is the new thing, I think, with this registry, and you can then combine it maybe in the future with a lot of clinical data sets that are already available. I think that is also a good way to go.
I think Carlos wanted, no? Well, we have discussed a lot, and also having the experience of our hospital, and we know long time ago we were fully we incorporated fully the digital registries for the healthcare of our patients. So we are thinking that the future will go, as you say, ideally there will be, and we are here also considering and interacting with some resources that are already in place in Spain in order to scan the digital records from our patients. And we hope that hospitals like this one and probably like yours, big hospitals in the future that are fully digitalized, will also provide opportunities to data collection and data capture, as you say. I think that we all agree that probably we are not fully prepared for that. At least all the hospitals are fully prepared for that. If we were prepared, obviously we think that we will build up something using those opportunities to immediately collecting data from clinical records in a way in which the clinician could also wouldn't have to do an extra effort collecting data. But because we think probably we are not that close yet to have that, and keeping in mind that that should be the way to go, and that's what we should do in the future. And with the budget that we probably have, as you said, although we agree with you that registries in the future will have to be built up on that capacity, what we still see that probably they still need just the traditional way of collecting data. And so what we are proposing is just to simplify the data sets to collect, the amount of fields to collect, and ideally to make it as similar as possible to how you define the different aspects in your daily clinic in order to simplify as much as possible data collection. But we agree with all your comments.
Could I suggest a first step might be to look at or collect information on all the data which is currently held in pediatric and adult pediatric registries of those patients who pertain to the members of the TransplantChild. So, and if we knew the fields, I mean, for example, I'm thinking of UK BT, blood transfusion and transplantation. And every year we fill in a green form for transplant patients of all sorts, and it says whether they're alive or dead, what their transaminases are, what their renal function is, what their full blood count is, whether they've had any events, but not much else, or in their immunosuppression. So it's basic data, but it is a starting point. If we wanted, if we knew what data was readily available, could simply be requested from local organizations or national organizations, then that would be a good starting point. We could also find out which organizations on the map, which we've so carefully collected, don't have any data or don't have systematic data, and then so we know where we have to sort of build the basic data from organizations who are going to contribute in due course. So you know what you've already got, you know what your quick wins are. And the other thing I would suggest is that there needs to be a governance arrangement about data security, about data transfer agreements, about, for example, if you use this very basic data to organize an audit or research with a commercial company, under what basis would that be done? What would the confidentiality arrangements be? And who would have access to the data and under what basis? So in other words, to have the legal framework, the governance framework in place, even with the most rudimentary data. So in other words, let's not collect data that we don't know what we're going to do with, and we don't know what we're allowed to do with it legally. Although we know some of those things because the European Union has specified them, but some other things, it's not clear. And you need to have things on paper to say what you can and cannot do specifically for this data.
So we try to do that as a kind of exercise for try to look the different registries. And the first issue was the language. And that was the first obstacle. And the second was the diversity of the registry, because the aims of the registry are different. And we know that in transplantation, the most or maybe have more time is the allocation of the organ, the donation, and also the first information of the transplant. But the follow-up is very wide and very difficult to try to standardize. And it was my impression. And I know also that the systems that already are collecting that registry are totally different, and there are some difficult to try to connect this kind of registry. So if we want to try to make one effort from each center, we need to establish the collection per center. We need to establish how you you make the registry to these platforms. For example, you have IT system or IT manager or IT or data manager in your center, and how you can, if it's possible, to collect this information and try to use in the same time that you collect in the already registries.
It's very difficult to add a double system, and so I think we have no money and we have no people to do that, and it's our experience. The only money and organization we have, it's the national organization, as you said, for the existing registry. And I agree, for the authorization, for many things, the work has been done to have the authorization, to have the organization. And I think we can ask for children a specific organization for the follow-up, because it's not so much patient in each country. I don't know, you have probably the answer. What is the organization of we are 18
Centers. 18, yes. Yeah, 18 healthcare
countries. And so
11 countries, 18.
Yes. And how many of this country at the national registry? There is a problem for that? Each country had a registry in our ARN?
You mean the national registry in pediatric
Yes.
transplantation?
Yes.
Not all the countries have a national registry, maybe for combined adults and pediatric, but not specific for pediatric.
No, not specific for pediatric, but we can, I don't know, but first we can ask, what are the organizations? I think it's the way. We can not add more and more work for each little, you cannot imagine an organization like that. Because we can ask, because the answer and would only come from political way, because we need authorization. It's a very specific activity, and it's very difficult. In my experience, it's very difficult to be allowed to have the information on patient and to can give the information at European level if you have no authorization. And the upper, and then to use what is in what you can use, not to add some, because we have many new registry. We cannot manage that without money.
In terms of regulation, I'm sorry, go ahead, sorry.
Well, it's just one comment, because I'm aware that in France, for example, the National Registry, all the data are transferred to ELTR, for example. So I'm not sure that the language is a problem, because they were able to transfer the data from our French National Registry automatically to the European Liver Transplant Registry, which is English. So this is maybe something we need to consider for other countries, and even for this registry. I'm sure that we could also have data transferred, a minimal data set, and that we decide on to be transferred to a TransplantChild registry and work on that. So at least would be we would have at least epidemiological data about the numbers, about the survival. So maybe not on quality of life, but at this we can think about it afterwards. But initially we would have numbers, incidents, survivals, patient survivals, graft survivals, because I think that in any registries you have these data. And ages at transplant.
And we can ask our national organization, because of the European registry, to add some information about quality of life that we develop in our hospital or reference. We can ask that. Probably.
I'm ambivalent to the problem. I see that we have to have a registry, and also I think it looks like a very good opportunity with a funding opportunity. But on the other hand, the first question that comes up in my mind is, why do we need another registry? For instance, with livers, I would say we're very happy with ELTR. They're very approachable. They have amazing data already. So what can we contribute that is not there already? So that would be my first question. And then the next question is, I can only echo what other people have said. It's the feasibility. I think to really produce something better than there is already with the limited resources will be a challenge. So I wouldn't say, oh, move on and let's give up that thought. I think we need a smart collaboration. I don't think the existing registries will be too open to give their data away because it's their justification for existence. But if we can somehow combine and collaborate with existing structures, that may be a way forward.
We have not disregarded that option. So in terms of regulation, you have to remind that this is going to be an European Union supported registry. So the ERNs already have a consent form in which the patients can consent, data collection and the collection of data within the registries will be covered by that informed consent. The standards and the recommendation have to manage data protection, and all the recommendations about the registry are already being provided by the European Union. And obviously, the design and the proposal of the registry we already will cover and will take into account all the needs of governance and specifying very specifically, in a very open way and very comprehensive way, all the needs for governance, and obviously that should be an agreement among all of us. That's for us. That's not questionable. In terms of getting data from other registries, that would be ideal, but we cannot have the answer from the very beginning. So if we build up the proposal in the collection of registries, because as you said, the proposal also incorporates this idea of compiling, making a registries of registries. But if we don't get that data from these registries, then we could not build up anything. So if you think that you can help in accessing those registries or just trying to discuss how we could incorporate those data, that will be an effort, obviously, that we could sparse from the idea of creating a new registry. We have scanned all the possible registries in which we should contact and we should collaborate. Sorry, just very. And in terms of as I mentioned before, there is a task force among the 24 ERNs in order to work this. So we will be working in the next months during the time of the proposal, for the time the proposal will be open and later on. And obviously any, what the European Union is encouraging and is very firmly encouraging is the openness and the data sharing and the interoperability among registries. So if any of the ERN-based registries have data that eventually could be used and incorporated in a registry with a different, broader view, it will not be very easy for them to say no, because they are being funded by the European Union. Other thing will be the existing registries, just supported by societies or for other different sources, and we will have to see how accessible they are, but we will not discard from the very beginning that option. And in case we don't get that data, we will try to make sure that getting all the data sets, as Alistair said, from all these registries, we could detect what could be important to collect or how to create our fields in order to be sure that we make as simple as possible the new effort of data collection. But yeah.
One quick sentence. My first point is we need to define our aim. Why do we need another registry? I think that's the first step. What's the beauty of this, of having a transplant child registry? What does it provide that we don't have already? I think that's before we move to feasibility. The first thing is to say, hey, this is why we need one. And I think that answer hasn't been given yet.
I think that's relatively easy because there is no registry which covers all of the modalities of transplantation in all of the countries for which we are responsible for providing improvement in services. So I don't think we have any choice to do this. And I think there will never be a registry which will do the things that we want to do. So there's no question it's the best thing to do. The question is really on the limited resources and the time scale and the purposes, all the different purposes, and they're all valid ones to which we would put this. How are we going to do what needs to be done with limited resources in the time available? So I would be in favor of keeping it simple to begin with. In terms of getting data from other organizations, I wonder if we were to aim for the very highest standard of data collection endorsed by the EU, then we could give anyone who shares data with us, we could give them a certificate or a stamp of approval. Your data is good enough for us, and that would be an inducement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we want the best data. There's no point in having second-rate data.
We certainly can help and contact our national organization, our network for organ allocation. In France, it's the network for organ allocation that has the registry, so they have the activity of all centers, all organs, and so I would suggest that maybe we write a common letter, a proposal asking if they would be willing to share data with a pediatric registry. And we could, each of us, try to get in touch with our national organization and see if there's something that we can work. I'm quite sure there would be something that would be able to be done, at least in France, because we were able to transfer the data to the LTR, so they were willing to share data. But what I know also is that, for example, these are not private registries. It's a national registry, so I think it would be free, would not cost any money.
But do you think that the data that is collected in those national organizations is what we are speaking here? I think because I mean I'm not myself contributing to these data pools, but I think it's
come back to Uri's question. So what is the aim of the registry?
Mm-hmm. The aim of the registry could be to first to consolidate this idea that working on several transplants we could have more a broader view of the complications of children, to build up the foundation for the incorporation of future information coming from patients, to support research projects or research opportunities. So if we build up a registry, we could be a good partner for future research institutions, pharma companies, or any type of it will be a way really to take advantage of building up the ERN just with this vision that we just gave to our ERN. And then I think that by the Europe registry and the opportunities that will be offering in the future, we could really have an extra tool that is not available now in Europe, and that could just really could help to improve the quality of care of patients and to decrease or to ameliorate some of the complications that we still see in patients. If we were doing an audit of PTLD, and let's say that a new biotech company is just making some effort to develop off-the-shelf specific T cells for the treatment of EBV reactivation in PTLD, and they want to know what's the incidence of PTLD in pediatric population in Europe. What would be the best source to get this information, that our registry, in order for them to evaluate if it's doable or not the effort to develop this new tool, in having a preview idea of how useful will be or how applicable will be. I think that all these things that we are discussing, or let's say that we were discussing yesterday about identifying patients that are out of treatment without immunosuppression and could have reached operational tolerance. If we incorporate this in our registry, that data will be the foundation to. I mean, if you don't see the whole data, you can also. It's not that easy to think in new opportunities of improvement on projects. So just to support not only but to support research, to support improvements in clinical care with this common view, I think that is an effort worth doing.
I think there is you have what you can consider all the transplanted children as a new disease, and so we just are looking up what happens after, and we describe how many have PTSD, how many have a problem with the quality of life, and it's what we need to have in this registry. But at one point, we will know what happened, because what happened before, and all the information about what happened before the transplantation and the correlation you need to have at one point, where in the registry we add. And so we can build a new registry with just what happened after, but we need to have what happened before. And all this work is done, and we not have to redo what we have done. I don't know if I explained correctly, but it's a problem.
No, I completely understand you.
And we are agree, and we need the patient to ask what are the questions we need to ask in the new registry. And I completely agree. Your presentation is very. We need to do that, but to do that we have no money, no many, and so if we want to build something that is possible to do at this point, we can start to ask what are the questions, the first part, and then we can ask to add this question in the registry that exists, and the minimal is to have the information in the registry that we add. I think. It's too much work to do.
Would it be helpful if we sent you the data set that we need to fill in annually in our national registry? I think that it would give at least for our registry, it would give you the answer, because we need to give news every year annually. And the questions are rejection, yes or no, PTLD, yes or no, cancer, yes or no, alive, of course, yes or no, and immunosuppression, and then you have a yes or no, and then you have to detail. So this would already give information, but we can, what I could do is send you the formula, the formulary. I was looking.
It would be extremely helpful.
The data sheet that we fill in every year.
It will be extremely helpful, and you have to think that we are not closing this today. So what we are doing is just to discuss what should be our strategy for the next months, especially when the call is open.
See if we can have something that would be useful for the ERN without too much work for us.
I'm sure most of that information will be useful, and if eventually we could use it, it will be very, very, it will make more easier just to fill in the registry. But first we need to have a skeleton or a tool for data collection. Yes, it could be in the next weeks or days. We are just sharing all the experiences with all ERNs. We will see if other ERNs are pretending to build up a new tool completely. That will take a lot of amount of the money that we have, or we could use already, free developments that we could use to build up registries. There is another idea, is that if any of the 5 initial ERNs that got slightly a bit more of money of what we will get have developed tools, we could use those. There could be an option to take advantage of those tools. But what we have is one and only opportunity in the next weeks to get these funds. They may not be enough. We agree they are not enough, but it's just a starting point. What we are just learning from all the ERM project is that things are aligning little by little, and we are building up little by little. But if you miss the first train, you may not have another opportunity. So that's the clue. We may not have sufficient funds to support in the long term the registry. None of the ERNs are going to have that, not even the ones that were initially funded. That's already is something very evident for all of us. But we have this, if we think we have a good idea and we can build up something that is not there, I think that we should go for it, and then we will just build it on it. We can establish a set of data elements, and if some countries or some hospitals can import data from existing registries and just uploading them in our new registry, that will be excellent. If some others don't have that opportunity, but they commit to the registry, they will have to do it by hand. And in the future, maybe when new tools are developing, maybe in the first years we have to incorporate those data just by hand and duplicating efforts, but in some years' time we may have new tools that could help us with this. But we have already our tool available. Well, that's, I don't know.
I was surprised about your registry. So there is a registry when you say if the child has PTLD, for example,
Yes.
and the annual.
Complications, yes or no. And if you click yes, then you have all the complications appearing. And then vascular, sepsis.
And the status of graft function annually?
Yes.
Yes. And does it happen in your country also? And your? No. The data that France is transferring to ELTR is not that. We have not such a registry, and the ELTR hasn't, because they focused on, as Eduardo said,
They have a minimal data set.
a minimum. Okay. But I think that what Eduardo is saying is that currently there is no big registry containing PTLD, rejection, complications. But if in France you have, it is very simple for you. It is difficult for me, it is difficult for Uli, but you have done the work. So currently it is impossible for them to obtain that information, because in the international European registry there is no information about that, and that information is what is needed in a network like this.
Pierre had a question. He has not.
Eurotransplant doesn't have a registry where they collect data annually. Yeah, but Eurotransplant may have also the data of the main centers and can have the data. I don't know Eurotransplant, because France is not part of Eurotransplant. France has its own national organization, and so, but.
Is there any publication about that? About PTLD annually or graft function? Any publication of the French registry?
Publication for the national. We can. It's open. If you need to, you want to make a study, it's open. So there are publication about. Most of the publication are about procurement. But if you ask and you build a project, you ask them, and then you can use the national data. You just have to ask the people who are agree to involve in the study, and some centers say no, and so you use only the center that would participate.
Like any study you want to do with a registry, there was a paper who was published 2 years ago on cancer post-transplantation, and then they reported the incidence on 12,000 patients. I don't know how many, but you need just to write to the national organization Like you have done for biliary atresia and ELTR, and then they give your approval and you get the data they have.
Well, I think it's clear that the European Union has sent a message to us. They have a call. That's the problem. It's an imminent call for 17 new registries. Curiously, the same number of ERNs that don't have already a registry. So the message is clear. We want you to have a registry. They are not talking about how simple or complicated should be this registry. It's our work to do that, but it's what it is. So we have two options now. The first is, well, we are going for that. Yes, we will have time to discuss, to see how can align our contribution to our national registry that seems to be not the same in every country. So it's, and these kind of things. But the first decision is just, we are going for this call or not. And we have to agree in some model of registry, agree as much simple as we can, the minimum profile of data, including what type of organ this patient has, the basic immunosuppression, PTLD, rejection, this kind of minimal data. And prospective, yes. It's my opinion, at least. I don't know if you agree with that, no? Yes, because, well, it's...
I mean, of course, we could do it prospectively, but once we have the tool, the development, the registry, if there is any suggestion among some centers just to build up a new project, or we can apply, if we apply to a research call and we can use the registry for retrospect, I mean, the tool will be there. So it's just, but yes, we could agree in a common set of elements and a prospective collection of data.
Dr. Kalisinski.
Yeah, I completely agree that we need this registry because it's obligatory, probably, yes, according to the European Union demands. And to make it as simple as possible, I think we should go step by step. So I support the idea to just send us or propose a set of data. Then we can compare it with our databases on the national or hospital levels, depending on the local organization, and how we can provide the data as export of Excel files or anything like that, or direct transport. This is not easy also, because the systems are very different, old, new, and we've been doing it once, and a lot of data was lost when we changed the system for the new one. So, and the coding of the many data are very different, you know. Once it's yes or no, once it's number, once it's just text, and so on. And I have another question and proposal, because to my understanding, we will not make a scientific study on the basis on this. This is only the opportunity to identify the population in which we can make a quality analysis on the basis of the survival and so on, basic data. But the new part of this, and I think the basic aim is the quality of service and quality of the patient's life. So the second part is prems and proms. And I think, my question is that probably this should be very universal for every urn. Should it be done for every urn the same? Because these questionnaires of quality of life, of things, they are very universal. They don't say this is patient after transplantation, or this is a patient after GI surgery or anything like that. So I think this would save money. This would make it very simple, and probably would be also for general analysis for whole number of urns very important when it would be comparable. So I think you should discuss it on the meeting if it is possible to create such a things. Thanks.
I agree. It is attractive, and I think we should go for the call, but at the same time, we need to be realistic. And Eduardo, the examples you gave for PTLD or for tolerance illustrate that you need a massive amount of data to have a meaningful search. So why don't we, or is it not possible to identify 5 or whatever existing registries, and you use the call to somehow connect them to allow for a unified search? You know, not to reinvent the wheel. They will not give you the data unless the government makes them pass it on. But if you allow their existing structures and you spend the thought and effort and money into combining them, that might be a compromise.
That's much more difficult to do than it sounds, because patients own their own data. And if you're going to do something with their data which they didn't agree to when they originally gave the data or gave it indirectly as part of their care, then to go back and use it for those purposes requires, particularly if it's research, requires consent. And if the data has been anonymized or pseudo-anonymized, you can't actually find out who they are in order to consent them. So so data sharing on that basis has to be, you have to be very clear of why the data was given and for what purpose you're going to use it in the future for the purpose of these studies. So it can be done, but it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And the other thing is, the point I didn't make earlier is that there is no database, there's no registry which cross-cuts children's transplants of all different sorts. And I think from the discussions we had 2 days ago about the cross-cutting nature and the similarity of the care of the cross-cutting nature of patients after transplantation, I think that's a very good case for having our own database, because no one else will provide a database of the data we require.
So if we agree that we should go for the call and try to make a registry, we will start just, as you said, collecting data sets from any of your sources and comparing them, and just we will need your help for that. Based on that, we will propose a set of basic data to collect from all the transplanted from all types of transplants, and there will be, if some of your institutions or some of your national registries have more comprehensive or more detailed data collection than others, if we will try not to overwhelm those that have the maximum number of data already collected, to asking them to collect them in a completely different way or just to duplicate it. Obviously, there will be different levels. There will be some centers that more easily will just have to find a way, or we will help them to find a way to move the data or to recover the data, or to simultaneously contribute to the registry and the new registry in one set of one effort. For those, probably the effort will be easier, and others we will realize that we are not contributing with those data to our national registries, and then we will have to work on we'll have to put an extra effort. But at least in 3 years' time, we will have this registry ongoing. It will be open to, it will be it will be how to say it, it will be visible for the European Union. It will be just a new registry, a new tool, and then maybe opportunities for support will come later. So I think that if we all agree, we just have to find a way in the next weeks of how to yeah, Marisa.
I'm sorry. Is that I don't know if you said it before, but the call will be open next week, and according to relating to the thing that Dr. Kaliszewski has said, is that of course the quality of life of patients is something that will be common to all the ERNs, not only us, but I think that we have something especially that is the pediatric part of it. So even with the conversation with Aurordis, that is the Federation for the Patients Association, and they are really interested in including quality of life and trying to monitor this kind of things, is something that is really up, but at the moment is not in the top of the priorities of the ERNs. So somehow, if we do a little bit about that at the beginning, just for beginning, it may be a difference and to be in the loop from the beginning.
We have been talking to other the other 4 ERNs that have a pediatric focus in the last Brussels meeting, and as I said, next week there will be a teleconference of 2 hours in which a set of questions is going to be distributed to all the ERNs. So we could incorporate your suggestion just to see if any of the 19 ERNs are thinking in incorporating PROMs and PREMs in the new registries, because what European Union will favor are synergies among ERNs. So if we identify interest in other ERNs that are going to prepare a registry in building up this kind of data collection sources, it will be even a good opportunity for us to establish a synergy with them, trying to establish a common tool, or even proposing there and leading that area, and that will be very well accepted by the European Union, because they will, although it's not all the ERNs will be funded, they also say that if they detect some synergies among different projects, they may have a reinforcement, and they may encourage that synergy, but probably maybe having an extra funding for those. So we still have room to find that type of collaboration. It will be a very, very excellent idea, just to even propose it, or just to detect if any other has interest to build up something similar. It would be a very good.
Okay, so we send you this project, but we need your feedback in a few days, because the call is for next week, I think, no? And well, let's start with it.
I think we have 3 months to, Maris, or Cristina, or Maris, is 3 months what we have to? Yes. It is 3 months until the call is closed, so we have 3 months to prepare the project. No? It's 3 months.
Until September, yes.
So could we say we have an agreement to go for it and to build up a registry, and we have somehow a roadmap that we have to adjust in the next days, weeks, just to make sure we are all happy and we are all we agree on how to go, and we will explore those options that you suggest. We have thought about that. I mean, that would be ideal, but as Alistair said, I think it's probably going to be even more complicated than just but
I think just from the response in this room, you will see how many antibodies you will generate in all the centers to duplicate the work for that data management that's necessary. I think we shouldn't underestimate that. No. I don't want to be negative. I think it's an opportunity. We need to go for the opportunity. I think there is a consensus here as well. But we should really look, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think really we need to say, what do we want to make better and how do we make it work? I think that's the first 2 questions before we go more into detail, how nice to make talk about the quality of the registry. I think that's last in that row of questions.
Okay. But we have to be ready for a next scenario in which, let's say that we have agreed that we need a registry, we have agreed that we have to define a very simple data set of fields to collect. We recognize that in some centers those data may be already in another repository of data that to which they are contributing to. So the next option will be that we could collect that data from the source that already has it. That could be an excellent way to simplify our effort. But if that's not happen, or if that doesn't happen in all the extension of all the centers, or although we see that this data we want to collect together, all types of transplants, is individually collected in some other registries, but the owners or the curators of the registries are not willing to share that data and to transfer that data, we may have a scenario in which we need to get this data again, and or to double record this data in the new registry and in the, I mean, what would we do if that's a scenario happens in some centers? We cannot abandon the idea because of so we should go forward. And then we will have to be clever enough to find ways to simplify that extra effort in the future. But if we don't have the first foundation, the first roots to do that, no.